Okay, now we would like to move on to the second leg of today's FDP. In the second leg of today's FDP, we have Bharti Ali, who exactly is a development professional and social activist working for the rights of women and children for the last 30 years with a specific focus on access to justice. She is one of the co-founders of HUC, Center for Child Rights, and currently is its executive director. Through her work, Bharti has contributed to research, capacity building of key stakeholders, and making laws and policies on the rights of children nationally and internationally. Ma'am, I would like to, hand over the session to you.
So, like I said, I'd like to start with a little bit on child rights and how we understand child rights actually. Considering that 37% of the country's population are children below the age of 18 years, I think it becomes important to pay equal, at least adequate attention to issues that concern children. And it's also true that children, while children are individuals with rights, they also don't live in isolation. They are part of a family, a community, and so what impacts families and communities also impacts children and their rights. Uh, with that understanding and with the fact that often, it's very loosely said that children are nation's future and we have to ensure that they have a better tomorrow, but their today is what matters the most. And if we don't look at the today, then somewhere we are failing them for tomorrow as well. Also, that investing in children will have a cumulative spin-off. There's no doubts, but that investment has to happen today. And I say investment in terms of not just human resources, but also financial resources. There's investment of love, care, every other possible investment that is required if we want to see that cumulative spin-off. And like Mahatma Gandhi said, that if we really want to have real peace in the world, we'll have to begin with children. And today, the world is at a stage where we badly need peace, if nothing else. The rights are interconnected. So there are questions that one keeps asking oneself, and I'm putting those to everyone who's linked in today. When we look at hunger, we look at starvation, we look at the way they are connected to children's vulnerability, the way they increase the risk to disease, early death, infant mortality, child mortality. But these are also issues which lead to economic exploitation of children, trafficking, and other forms of abuse. So are we really making those connections? Stories around sexual exploitation, around trafficking of children, usually fail to make that connection as to who are these children, where are they coming from, why have they got into that situation in the first place. Similarly, when we talk of delinquent behavior, children in conflict with law have got attention post Nirbhaya case that happened, which involved a juvenile. But when we look at delinquent behavior, we again fail to make connections with the child's existence, with the child's early years, with the child's social and economic conditions, and several other aspects that probably led to behavior which is not acceptable to most of us. Similarly, when we talk of children belonging to the Dalit communities or minorities and other ethnic groups, dropping out of education is a phenomenon which is specific to children of such certain social background. And are we looking at that? Are we studying that? Are we highlighting that? There are stories, one-off incidents, sorry, which draw attention. For instance, a Dalit child is not treated well in and that probably becomes a story. But the systematic elimination of children belonging to certain social groups does not come out, through media stories. So it's one of incidents that catch attention, and therefore we need to ask as to uh, what happens when more children from these communities are dropping out of the education system. Where are they going? Uh, then we've seen around the CAA and NRC debate, we saw that there were children who, with adults, of course, were struggling for an identity. But this has been a long drawn struggle. It hasn't started overnight. Uh, and I'll come to a slide where I'll sort of also show how registration of birth does not necessarily mean that you also have a birth certificate, which gives you an identity, which gives you a name and a nationality. But then what happens, when you don't have that identity and nationality and name, when you're not recognized in the records? How does it impact your access to school, your access to health? All of that should be something which should be a concern. So like I said, children's rights is not about just loving and caring for children, but actually also answering some of these issues, policies, the larger macro development policies and political moves that are made and their impact on children's lives. Statelessness, state of being a refugee is an issue which seldom catches attention. We may get a news, news sometimes, again, politically being motivated more or less around the Rohingyas, for instance, as an example. But what about the Rohingya children? Because they are also here with children. And that hasn't really got attention. Are we as a nation saying that if there is a child on the Indian territory, because the child belongs to a community, that is a refugee community or stateless, that child will not be able to access certain basic rights? Are we willing to say that? Do we even have stories highlighting any of this? And then situations of disaster, civil unrest, mass violence, riots, genocide. I mean, some of these situations are increasing, in recent years. There's man-made as well as natural disaster. But these are also situations which actually render children more vulnerable, compared to adults. There's a lot of trafficking that happens at these times. There's sexual violence, there's abuse, there's economic exploitation. And children often don't figure, in any compensation scheme that may be announced in such times. Except during COVID, where we saw that there is a pre-M cares fund for children, where again, we've seen that not much has happened. Not many children have really been able to benefit out of the scheme. But by and large, the compensation packages, rehabilitation packages don't really consider children. And definitely not if there are children-headed households, because these are times when children do lose their parents, and then the entire household becomes a child-headed household. And being a minor, they're not even recognized, therefore, in compensation schemes and for rehabilitation packages. There are questions like, can the treatment meted out to such children be the same as that meted out to any other child who is rendered destitute or who faces loss of parental support? So these are more vulnerable situations that require special attention, special focus. And are we making those linkages? Are we making those special efforts? Like I said, all rights are connected. There is interconnectedness. So if there's no right to nutrition, clothing, shelter, it also leaves children unprotected in many ways. And that was something which the Supreme Court had recognized, way back in the Francis Corali judgment. Uh, and then, despite the Supreme Court recognizing that, uh, the bare necessities of life have to be met and fulfilled, and those are the fundamental rights of every citizen, including children. We have children who languish in institutions and are often deprived of these basic fundamental rights. You don't have, we have programs like the ICDS programs, but you don't have ICDS connected to children in institutions. So where are they getting their nutrition from, and is that adequate? Similarly, we have right to education, but are children in institutions being able to pursue their right to education? More often, I mean, most often, they're not even sent out of the shelter homes where they reside on the fear that they're going to be running away. But if children were to receive their basic rights and freedoms, we've seen that they don't run away necessarily. Not all children do. So therefore, what is needed is interventions which ensure that all children are able to live and grow in an environment that does not make them vulnerable. And prevention is a very, very major aspect that we have not been able to invest in, and that's not written much about. So a lot of media attention actually comes in when there are protection issues involved, when a harm has already been done to a child. So post-harm responses and reactions can be found from just about every responder, be it media or be it any government agency, or even often enough even NGOs. Whereas what we really need is attention to how can children be prevented from getting into these vulnerable situations or getting into a situation where they have to face some or the other violation or harm. And those stories are not really probably because they don't, uh, they don't catch human emotion. But we need to bring that human emotion even in those stories, and spend more time on those. Uh, so there is a spectrum to be looked at, specific measures, special measures for special categories of children, a life cycle approach, appropriate interventions, continuum of care, non-discrimination, best interest of the child, and as I said, increased investment and spending on children's rights by every stakeholder. So when we do our stories and keep this in mind, probably we'll be able to add, more critical information that will guide policy and law reform in the future. This is just to share with you what is spent on children. So we do budget analysis for children on a regular basis. Every time the finance minister announces the budget, we get into quick action to see what is there for children. And you can see that there is a consistent sort of decline in budget for children. And some very, very important schemes have seen a decline. In fact, there was decline even during the pandemic, which was the worst that could have happened because we needed to invest in children's nutrition and health much more than ever before. Yes, there were NGOs who came forward. There were ration supplies through NGOs. There were ration supplies also through government and under the ICDS scheme. Some Anganwadis were functional, but there were so many children who were left behind, and we've seen that budgets for some important schemes have been cut down over the last few years. There is this funny, way of now planning for children. A lot of planning happens, at least not just for children, and I'll say the entire social sector. A lot of planning that happens and the investments that are being made without adequate transparency and accountability. So there is merger of schemes that is happening, and for the layman, for public, it's very difficult to understand where that merger is happening and how it's happening. while the finance minister may say that they have increased the budget for children, but if you look at it in proportion to the increase in the national budget, then it has gone down for sure. And that's what we're showing. So, you look at absolute increase. So you may say that, last year it was 100 rupees, now it's 105 rupees. That's just an absolute increase that you're looking at. But in proportion, there isn't really an increase that is needed. Uh, the media stories also around the budget time are very, very focused on what probably appeases to the corporate sector, and some news around income tax rules, regulations, and changes in the income tax slabs. But some of these issues get sidelined, and we really wish there was importance given to uh, these issues as well. One critical role that I see for media is, evidence-based stories which are, probably based on serious and good journalism and investigative journalism as well, rather than sensationalization. And I say that because governments have actually stopped investing in research. Unlike grants that used to be given to academic institutions and other bodies for carrying out systematic research, we don't see that happening through the government anymore, and not at the same scale at all. Then, if you look at the corporate social responsibility mandate, because when that came out, a lot of people were hopeful that that 2% expected from the corporates could be used to invest in research. But there again, research actually does not figure in the mandate at all. So they can only probably give money for certain charity-driven programs, but not research. The right to information, as all of us know, stands compromised in a huge way. So you can try filing right to information applications, and most often you're told that this information does not pertain to our department, or we are unable to share because we need to maintain confidentiality, etc., etc. So that is completely compromised today, and NGOs are unable to garner funds, or even academic institutions are unable to garner funds for research. And as an NGO, since I talked to you as an NGO, we've also seen how NGOs receiving foreign funds can no longer engage in advocacy. Advocacy is the bad word. So the FCRA regulations have clearly said no advocacy. Advocacy maybe means that you could use your FCRA registration. So that's where the situation is. And in these times, therefore, media definitely has a very, very critical role to play in bridging the research gap through investigative journalism, evidence-based news, and stories. Like I said, there are some key issues which require attention, particularly concerning children. There are many more. I've just listed a few here, and the idea is to just help you think of the many more that can follow. So proof of birth, name, and nationality. 89% births registered, but only 75% children have a birth certificate. And I don't know how many of you are aware, but the onus for birth registration actually lies with the governments and agencies of the government. So if there's an institutional birth, the hospital has to immediately inform the registrar of births. If there is a trained birth attendant who is assisted in delivery, then if there is a responsibility cast on the trained birth attendant to report that birth to the registrar of births. But when it comes to birth certificate, the onus is still with parents. And often enough, parents who are illiterate, who are unable to follow, the cumbersome procedures and processes, or for that matter, parents who cannot genuinely afford to miss their day's wages to go to an office and, carry out these formalities. So the people who are actually not having a birth certificate are often belonging to a certain class where parents will not be able to acquire these documents for their children. And the onus for their birth certificate, therefore, also has to shift to the state and its agencies, and a mechanism should be built in there. But we don't have stories which give such insights, which show where the problem really lies. And most litigation, whether in civil cases or in criminal cases involving children, because the age of the child becomes a very critical factor when it comes to legal cases. So a lot of litigation is around the issue of age determination. Uh, and there are so many families who have to sell off their lands, whatever little they have to take loans and debts to get lawyers to fight these cases around age determination. So it has a series of impacts, and the government itself actually has accepted that the proof of date and a place of birth is critical, is one of the most important documents. So we need to have more attention to some of these very basic issues. Again, adolescent sex ratio, for instance. There's a lot that, there was a time when a lot of stories appeared around falling child sex ratio, and that honestly drew attention of the government, and we were able to do something about it, to the extent that today we do see a lot of states, even states like Haryana, Punjab, that were being criticized for a very low child sex ratio, improving on that account. But adolescent sex ratio is something that has not received attention. For child sex ratio, the stories were around how sex-selective abortions are taking place, and the PC and PNDT law is being misused, and therefore that could be corrected. But for adolescent sex ratio, the question is, where are these girls disappearing? It can't be about sex-selective abortions when it comes to adolescents. So there's something else happening there. Is that a natural phenomena? Those are questions that should actually bother us, but we don't often look at such data. And therefore the next question does not arise. So there has to be a lot of engagement of media with the existing data, and that critical eye to see what is missing where. The adolescent sex ratio is worse than child sex ratio, by the way. We have elections coming up. There will be stories around what parties are offering, party manifestos. But again, we will not be able to see many stories on what party manifestos carry for children. What is there in these manifestos for children of migrant workers? COVID drew our attention to migrant workers, but then migrant workers also have families, and children are part of those families. And what about those children? Children with disability. Promises made to children who lost their parents during COVID. Like I said, natural disasters, man-made disasters, and what social protection is being offered in the forthcoming elections by different parties. Children deprived of liberty in areas affected by conflict. Birth certificate, I've already mentioned. So then, there's an endless list of issues, but are we going to see news on what party manifestos are offering for children? I don't know. Does that even draw attention of journalists when it comes to writing around elections and political issues? Then, yeah, like I said, there is need for responsible journalism. And I say that going back to the context of what happened on the law on juvenile justice. We got an amendment in 2015 because the juvenile who was involved in the Nirbhaya case was made out to be this monster. And not just him, or every child in the 16 to 18 age group was, suddenly became, this monster who really needs to be probably locked up before there's much havoc made. But I ask everyone, has there ever been a time in ever since this civilization came into existence, when children in their teenage or in that particular age were not indulging in risk-taking behavior? In fact, that is an age group where most children indulge in risk-taking behavior, and that's been the case uh, ever since, as I said, civilization came into existence. How much of it can be controlled? Actually, the brain science informs us that the frontal cortex of the brain is the last part to develop fully, and that happens, only until early 20s. So children in that age are drawn to risk-taking behavior, and some children take more risks, greater risks, which land them in the justice system. But what we see is, quotes on based on crime statistics, which say that 16 to 18-year-olds, are committing more crimes and therefore deserve stringent punishment. I, the law has changed. Now children can be treated as adults, those in 16 to 18 years. But are the statistics really supporting that change in law? And at that time also, people were saying that there is enough research, there is enough evidence which tells us that stringent punishments don't have a deterrent effect. But that was ignored, and ignored as much by media as by the population, the people at large. But one can understand that from coming from people who probably are not reading, are not aware. One doesn't understand that coming from media because, as I said, that's not responsible journalism. Responsible journalism would be investing in that kind of research before things are written about and based on evidence. The crime data, I'm just showing you what is there, what has been there in 2020 and 2021. So in 2020, there were 26,886 children in the 16 to 18-year age group who were booked for all kinds of crimes and apprehended by police. And this number increased to 28,539 in 2021. So that's what media is going to project, say, increase in crimes committed by 16 to 18-year-olds. The second important data is that 526 children in the 16 to 18 age group faced a sentence of imprisonment in 2020, which means they were tried as adults and they faced a sentence of imprisonment in 2020. This number has also gone up to 601 in 2021. So therefore, the news probably will be, these children are monsters and they deserve higher punishment because they are not learning their lessons. But like I said, it's an age where brain controls many actions. It's an age where where you need more attention and more of a reformative approach than a retributive approach. And there is enough research to support that contention. And those aspects have to come out through responsible journalism. And responsible journalism also means objective and unbiased journalism. We got death penalty introduced in the law against sexual offenses against children, and there was opposition to that. But was it really covered well enough to shake the common man? Again, does not have all the data and does not understand the nuances, because it's easy to come out and hold candlelight marches and ask for death penalty, but do we have enough data to know how the victims feel about it? How many victims would want death penalty in a situation where most sexual crimes against children are committed by people who are known to them? A significant percentage are committed by people who are from their family, where people share the same household with the child. And when you talk to those children or those families, they definitely don't want a death sentence. In fact, I was talking to some mothers, and some of them said, in cases of incest, where the father was the accused, and they said that let him go to jail, let him work there and send us money so that we can survive. They didn't want death penalties. So those are nuances which never get captured. And why don't they get captured in mainstream news? So that's where I say there is a need to be objective, and the journalism has to be unbiased, reflecting both and all points of views to the extent possible. Again, raising the age of marriage for girls to 21 years has caught recent attention. And all of us, I mean, I don't see why girls should be marrying early at all. Nobody wants to support early marriage. And if possible, the age should be, promoted, or girls should be encouraged to delay their marriage, and parents should be encouraged to delay their daughter's marriage as far as possible. But is law an answer to that? And today, I mean, a lot of news around it has played to the gallery, without, again, capturing voices of those who are going to be affected by such political decisions. We don't see enough efforts being made to understand and project the dissenting view coming from those who are going to be affected by such decisions. And I'm not talking about activists right now. Sorry. Again, issues of child labor. I don't know how much are we aware, but we need to be. If we are writing, and if we are covering stories around child labor and children. We used to get data on number of inspections, children rescued, FIRs, registered prosecutions and convictions under the child labor law through the questions raised in the parliament. And I've been scanning last 1 year's data, where suddenly, even in response to the parliament questions, the ministry has started saying, look at the NCRB data, and they start quoting the NCRB data. Now, the NCRB data is very poor. It's for whatever reasons, it's very poor, and it only shows something like 770 cases registered under the child labor law in 2020. Whereas the data that was being provided by the Labour Ministry earlier, which was not referring to crime NCRB, but referring to data received from the districts directly, from the Labour Commissioners directly, that projected figures that were as high as 50,000 children or 50,000 cases violations recorded. So that, nobody is really questioning those discrepancies in data. We are anyways very poor on data when it comes to a range of issues, particularly children's issues. Nobody can say how many children in India are in need of care and protection. Child labor data is as outdated as 2011 census. Child marriage, fortunately, NFHS gives some latest statistics, but otherwise, we are still going by 2011 in 2022, which is so shameful. So these are issues to be picked up, to be talked about, to be written about. I don't know how many of you know this, but there is a national child labor program of the government of India, but the budget this year, the budget of NCLP was cut down by 75%. And people were, even activists like us, were trying to figure out why is this happened, what is happening. Until we came across a note where it was decided that, the child labor program will be merged with the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, as if education was the only part that is to be looked at when you rescue children from labor situations. Education is indeed an important part. There's no doubts about that. But there are components, associated with children's health, including mental health. Under the child labor program, health checkups were, used to be carried out. A stipend used to be given to children who are released and rescued. So what is going to happen to all of that? And nobody is questioning these things. Nobody's even writing about it. Nobody's even writing about the fact that decision was taken without taking public into confidence, without any consultation with confidence. So the information was not in public domain for a very, very long time. And even when the budget was announced, this does not become part of the budget speech, and nobody writes about that. Now, and therefore we need to really capture, what is happening with all development policies, particularly those that are directly connected to children, as well as other development policies that need not be directly connected to children, but do impact children as much. So as I said, on food security, we have something really, really wonderful today, One Nation, One Ration Card scheme. Something that was demanded for a very long time by the Right to Food campaign in the country. So we've got portability of the ration card on paper, but in practice, there are many, many bottlenecks because they expect, again, there's Aadhaar link. If your ration card is not linked to Aadhaar, then you cannot really make use of it anywhere in the country. So what's the point? So there are those bottlenecks which are affecting migrant workers the most. And I mean, we work with children of brick-in workers, for instance, and we have seen that, they may be registered or enrolled in school in the source area, in their village where they belong. But when they migrate with their families to the destination areas, they have to lose out on their education. The source areas show 100% school enrollment, but they're not showing absence from school. So the data, the statistics on education are fantastic from the source areas, showing great enrollment rates. But since the children have moved out, nobody is showing what is happening to their attendance and whether they're able to continue with their education in the destination states. So there's portability of schemes required on several aspects, not just food and ration card, but also with education, also with nutrition and the ICDS program. The Anganwadi workers, when you talk to them in the destination areas, they say that, brick-ins don't fall in our jurisdiction because brick-ins are located outside the village. They are at the periphery. So these children don't get counted, and therefore no supplementary nutrition reaches children of brick-in workers while they are at the destination areas for about 8 months in a year. And these are critical questions. Now, e-shram registration has been talked about in a big way and is being promoted in a big way. But what are the benefits of e-shram registration? Who is receiving those benefits? At least is there any news which tells us how children of laborers are being affected or impacted or benefiting from e-shram registration? And I'm saying that because otherwise there is a labor card registration, which the state governments, the state labor department and the state governments run. And there are some benefits attached to the labor card for women, for women and children of laborers. But with e-shram, we're not really getting to hear much. And who's going to explore and who's going to inform, who's going to tell the public this is what it is, who's going to tell, labor, the labor class, people from the labor class, that this is what e-shram has for you. They can't read, they can't go on web portals and read what information is available on web portals, but they can definitely receive news. And news gets carried fast. In previous session, you've also heard about how social media is used, and increasingly, people, even in the remotest of areas, because of the need to have Aadhaar card and Aadhaar linked bank accounts and things like that, are also having to, use smartphones, and they are connected to social media in different ways. So can we reach out to people with information in print as well as audio visual? Those who cannot read print will have to have access to audio visuals. So yeah, some more vignettes that I'm just sharing. Media reports on child suicides during COVID was something that drew our attention, and we sort of looked at some 10 reports, all from English media. English media houses, and they were all in English. And these 10 articles, we found were largely focused on Kerala. 8 out of the 10 were focused on Kerala, which did lead to some immediate and swift action by the Kerala government, but it also subjected the state to heavy criticism. And there wasn't a balance in the sense that we weren't receiving much news from other parts of the country where children were committing suicide. And you couldn't make national and international comparisons on this aspect. We also saw that the term used was students, but children could have committed suicide for various reasons. And some very simplistic attempts were made, in terms of speculating the cause behind the child committing suicide. So we felt that, this was where the media could have probably done a little better job. We were grateful to the media for highlighting these issues, but also could have done a little better job, with actually exploring what leads, what are the possibilities, or reasons why children could be committing suicide. What are the mental health issues? What would be the responsibility of parents, families, neighborhoods, and governments, and not just the school system? So we saw a lot of mental health programs that came about, through schools, but nothing much when it came to parenting in such difficult times. And the government's attention could have been drawn to that had we received those kind of reports from the media. Like I said, the news did have an impact. The Kerala government did swing into action. Telecounseling and such services were put into existence. But, it's just about moving that little, taking that extra step to make news more useful and to make news more impactful, in terms of larger policy actions that can happen. The probable policy actions that can be taken. Around abrogation of Article 370, we saw news talking about a PIL filed by Inakshi Ganguly and Shanta Sinha on illegal detention of children as a preventive measure at that time. But, the entire focus was then on this PIL and the two activists rather than the child rights concerns in those times. So preventive detention actually is not allowed under the juvenile justice law. But we didn't see stories saying that. We didn't see stories saying that it is not allowed in law. So forget, what claims are being made or being denied. The fact is it is not allowed in law. And preventive detention in situations of conflict have been a very common phenomena, impacting young children and young people the most. I've already spoken about CA and RC. I'm not going to talk more about it, but let me tell you, we did a fact finding on impact of NRC on children in Assam. And there were children who said that, just because my name is not in the register, my friends tease me. My friends look down upon me. And that had such a huge mental health impact on children who would not make it to the register for some or the other reason. We also during protests at Shaheen Bagh in Delhi, for instance, which really drew a lot of attention, saw reports which talked about the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights questioning children's presence at the protest sites. But we didn't see enough reports to capture why were children there in the first place. The fact that there were mothers who said we could not have left them behind all alone while we were at the protest site. The fact that a lot of, a lot of arrangements were made for children for children's comfort while the parents were protesting. There were people who were doing theater, who were engaging children in different creative activities at that time while the parents were protesting. So nobody really wrote about those arrangements, and it became more of a sensational piece of news. So I just felt I should share it as a case vignette. And I'll leave you with these thoughts. We can, have little discussion if there is time and if the organizers permit. But capturing one-off incidents, turning them into high-profile cases versus capturing trends in a consistent manner is something we need to ponder over. We need to really think about. Um, Unearthing the truth versus playing to the gallery. I think every media says we are bringing the first news to you and we are bringing the first truths to you, but often enough it is playing to the gallery. So how are we going to make that distinction? And how are you going to really win people's confidence, because people are being able to see through all of this? Occupying the 24/7 space that media has now with sponsored agendas is something which must be questioned. We see not just sponsored agendas, we also see advertisements from political parties, ruling governments, also NGOs. And I'm questioning all of that, because this is really sponsored agenda, and what sponsored agenda should find, I mean, to what extent it should find that space in that 24/7 news channels is a question, versus need-based people's agendas. Information is needed, news are needed, but sensationalization will keep coming up as a question mark. And then we want, we sometimes we see reports that enthuse a lot of confidence. I mean, they're written with such confidence as if it is the ultimate truth. But some of those reports are very under-researched, and there is nothing, not even a line at the end of the report where the person, the reporter sort of humbly accepts the limitations of the report that is written, of the story that is written. So I guess that would be a good practice if one was to just put in that line where, one feels that the research is not sufficient, or probably there are other areas of research which need to complement or supplement the piece that has been written. So I'll leave you with some of these thoughts, and thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
ma'am. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, ma'am. It was absolutely extremely visionary, to learn all of it through the lens of a child rights activist. So thank you so much, for sharing all these key aspects. I would like to, ask if anyone has questions. Can you please raise your hands so that we can start with ma'am's permission the Q&A session. So Shomik Chatterjee has raised his hand. So, ma'am, with your permission, can we begin the Q&A session?
Sure.
Sure. Shomik sir, kindly please unmute yourself and pose your question to Bharti ma'am.
Very good evening, ma'am. I think I'm properly audible.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, okay. So I would like to request the organizer and ma'am that I would like to first lay down my observation. I'd like to share a story which probably all of you know, and then I would like to come to my question. So I think everybody is very comfortable in Hindi. So I am just reading out a quote. मैं मजदूर हूँ मजबूर भी मैं आपका गुनहगार हूँ आपकी साइकिल लेकर जा रहा हूँ मुझे माफ कर देना मुझे बरेली तक जाना है मेरे पास कोई साधन नहीं है और विकलांग बच्चा है this is actually I think all of us we know this is the story of Muhammad Iqbal. The story got broke during lockdown. He was traveling from Bharatpur, Rajasthan to Bareilly. My point is, if you look at the angle of the coverage, it was first broke in Hindustan Times Online, and I think National Herald covered it. In my limited knowledge, I didn't find any story of this incident in mainstream media. I may be wrong, but the point is, if you look at the story, it is not capturing the angle of that specially able child, and there is no extension as well of what exactly happened to the father and the child, or the what are the accommodations made by the government of their home state. So there are no follow-up specifically. So that is my observation. And following that, my question is to you, ma'am. Is it the reason that the capital intensive media system in our country does not consider these children as capable consumer of news? Hence, they lack paying attention towards it, towards them. Sorry.
Should I respond or?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Okay, all right. So yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for that observation because that's so important. One was getting stray incidents, getting to hear about stray incidents of children, parents who had difficulties in moving around during lockdown, especially migrant workers, and when they had children with such difficulties. Or younger children, infants, all those made some news here and there. But you've raised a very important point about follow-ups. So that's why I said, we don't want news on one-off incidents. We need news that reflects on trends, and there is a follow-up. Children with disability in this country do not easily get a disability certificate. Because parents don't know where to get it from and what are the procedures involved. The media does not give information on schemes particularly, so that is left for people to fetch from different sources. So, I can only agree with you that there is need for follow-up stories. Did anyone do a story on whether this child managed to get a disability certificate, because that is linked to what is known as a disability pension, which could have improved this child's life? Did we go up to that level of follow-up to see that the child is finally settled in life? That I'm sure, did not happen. So we need to break that. And, as people who are teaching, the journalists to be, I think you should be insisting on consistent coverage and follow-ups. The second point, you've again said something very important, and I completely, in fact, I do want to say that, yes, mainstream media does not look at children as their consumers. So therefore, they don't engage with children. Children is not a constituency to engage with. So they, at best, they will engage with a few activists, but definitely not with children whose issues are being highlighted. That's the problem. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for your.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to move on to Shudipta Pal. Can you please pose your question?
Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. I want to append a problem with you that we know the midday meal program is running on the elementary level of school, and the school authority are asked to provide, quote unquote, healthy, cooked, delicious, nutritious food at the cost of level rupees 4.97, including fuel. How is it possible? Quote unquote, my friend is telling that capital intensive media doesn't highlight that problem at all. Your what is required, ma'am?
Yeah, like I said, anyways, we are cutting down on budget for children. And this is such a mockery that you want to provide healthy, nutritious food at a cost of, under 5 rupees. Yeah, at a cost of under 5 rupees. It's a joke. It's a mockery. So we need more stories like this, and with evidence that this is what you will get in 4.497 rupees or 47 rupees. You can't get anything beyond this. Also, what is happening is increasingly there is abdication of state responsibility. So for a lot of these programs and schemes, the state is increasingly saying that civil society has to come forward. There are tie-ups, with different foundations to provide midday meals or to provide supplementary nutrition. There's a whole politics around, nutrition programs for children. One minister comes and brings in fortified food. Another one says that we'll give drops, as supplementary nutrition. So that politics needs to be unearthed and talked about as much. And if you don't have those insights, then the news will never get to the core of where the problem is. Midday meal scheme will come and go, will take different shapes, will get 5 rupees today or under 5 rupees tomorrow or more than that. But if you're not unearthing the politics, if you're not unearthing the fact that this cannot work, that there is state application of responsibility, then the problem will remain.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to now move on to our last person, Dr. Orgho Mukhopadhyay. Please pose your question to Bharti ma'am.
Good evening, madam. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Madam, just I want to make a clarification just for myself. The thing is that the development, this word is very important in journalism because the persons or the government who are doing the development, it's their trump card. What you have mentioned in manifesto, they are working, everything, promising. It depends on the development. As well as the persons, we like the people, the all cross-section of the people, they need development also. But the thing is that the government is depending for their campaign or propaganda of mainstream news media and all news media. But when they are lacking in the development, but they, if that should be mentioned, that should be written on the newspaper, but there is a thing that the advertisement cannot come or it can stop, and it has been happened. So, what do you think that the development, the reporter who is writing the developmental story, how he could do that or properly without any hassle, how it could be?
Okay, so what, we as we are a research organization, and so what we do is most of our research, in fact all, is based on government's own data and statistics. We very consciously try not to use data or statistics that is coming from other organizations which are not government organizations. And if you look at government data, that itself, has a story to tell. So I guess, those in the field of journalism will and should also stick to using government data and just, triggering the story that is coming out of it. An objective way to go about it is to collect views from all kinds of authorities, agencies, stakeholders, so that you are able to ensure objectivity in what you write. So, that's definitely has to be a way forward to have both views in favor of a measure being taken and views against a measure being taken highlighted equally, to remain unbiased and objective. And also, like I said, to engage with the constituencies that are affected and highlight, their stories, their point of view. So nobody, I think, in this country or in the world would be against development, because development is needed for everyone. But what kind of development? Questions around that have to be raised, through mainstream journalism. What kind of development, for whom, and at what cost? That's the larger question to be taken up in the stories that are written around development issues.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We don't have any more questions in the queue. So this brings us to the end of today's FDP. So I would definitely like to thank Snehashi sir Uma Shankar Pandey sir and Sucharita Bordhan ma'am for helping us go through and be part of this wonderful FDP. Also, I would like to extend my thanks to Press Club Kolkata, UNICEF, and St. Xavier's University Kolkata at large.
Can I just comment for a minute? Can I
Yes,
just comment
please,
for a
please,
minute?
please, please.
I'd like to thank Bharti for actually accepting the invitation. She's extremely busy, has a very hectic schedule, but on request and on realizing the importance of such a session, she agreed. She returned from the High Court, was stuck in a traffic jam. It is raining in Delhi. She just sought permission to kind of have more time, so we swapped the session. So thank you very much, Bharti, for giving your time, and we look forward to work with you again, because as you said, when you inspire, you need to continue to motivate, and we'll have you with us. And I also like to thank all our participants for accepting these changes. Sometimes we have to make these real-time changes, and we understood that you cooperated with us. So I do want to extend my thanks to all the participants as well. Thank you. Over to you, Vishali.
I think then we are done, but I would also like to add two other names to this list. I think without Manushri's presence and Devayon's presence, this definitely would not have been possible. So thank you so much for helping us with the logical and the technical support. So that brings us to the end of today's FDP. So it would be great seeing all of us all of you tomorrow. So till then, good night.